Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest. His name is Ryder Lee, last name Leeelee, and he's just published a new documentary. If you're watching this on Rockfin X or Rumble, you'll see the intro image and the title, A Clockwork Shining, Kubrick's Odysee 3. So this is a third part. There were two other documentaries about Kubrick that were featured on Gaia, and you can see these on Amazon. The 1 and 2 I have not seen. I got about halfway through this. It's really good, and features a lot of people. I've talked to Walter Bosley, who's in this. Mark Devlin, I was on his show this year talking about the smiley face killers, and then very famous mind control victim Kathy O'Brien with Transformation of America, and a lot of interesting things about mind control. We're kind of talking about stuff in the pre-show. This is not our first show. I talked to Ryder back in 2023. I think it was March 15th. The title of that show, you can watch it. I'll put a link to it, a reference to it, so you can listen to it, is Global Mind Control, Remote Assassins, and MK Ultra with researcher Ryder Lee. So I can now add as his documentary director, actually. So that's a new title. But Ryder, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on, brother. Really appreciate it. And I put a lot of work into this movie, a lot of time and energy and effort, blood, sweat, and tears into this bad boy. So I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it has good ratings. It has like last time I checked, 24 5-star ratings, and a different take. You know, sometimes people don't think about this movie as Mind Control, The Shining, and don't put it in the context of some of the other stuff that Kubrick was into. But once you really study it, it's really fascinating, and there's so many strange references in this, like Easter eggs of what you call them or anything. But maybe you can talk about how you got involved in this project and the research involved in the project, and how you lined up some of these other experts to talk about the project.
Well, what had happened was I was bringing Jay Widener on my show to talk about Kubrick and his previous two movies, which is Kubrick Odyssey 1 and Kubrick's Odyssey 2. And basically his original theory is that The Shining was Kubrick's confession to faking the moon landing. He was pretty much the original person that, came up with that theory, and he talks about it in his previous two movies. And I just started watching The Shining over and over and over again to bring him on, because I like watching people's content or read their books if I want to bring them on my show, or watch their movies if they have one. So in order to, have a really good, engaging conversation with them. And I was just rewatching The Shining over and over. And I'm like, well, what am I going to find in this movie that people haven't already seen? Because people have dissected this movie from end to end. There's so many different theories surrounding what it's really about: Native American genocide, the Holocaust. And I kept watching it. And as I was watching it, I just start seeing all these clues that point to the fact that this is an experiment that's happening up at the Overlook. This is something that is going on up here that is unlike anything that anyone has ever talked about before or has ever put together before. And as I started dissecting it and thinking about it, because as our previous show was about mind control, I was a really big study into MK Ultra and mind control. And I was like, this is really shaping up like an experiment, a mind control experiment that's going on up here. And then I, talked to Jay about it, and he was like, yeah, I think that you're right. And I was like, Jay, let's do a documentary about this, because he was supposed to do Kubrick's Odyssey 3, but he never got around to it. It was going to be, I think he was going to call it Kubrick the Magician or something along those lines, but it never came out. So I was like, this is the opportunity to, do a new movie, but on my theory, and that's what we decided to do. And it was an amazing process. Like you were mentioning, we have Mark Devlin in there. We have AFOSI Special Agent of the Air Force, Walter Bosley. We have Joe Atwell, which is an author and a researcher. And we have MK Ultra Monarch survivor Kathy O'Brien in it, and I worked tirelessly on this and putting it all together. So and it's not a rehashing of things that you already think that about, though we do kind of talk about some of those things, like some of the other theories that people have proposed that it's about, but it's something completely different.
There's a lot of things to take apart in his things. He's such a master craftsman that it's really fascinating. Like there's little pieces in there for everything. Very complex, based on a Stephen King novel, right? So it's based on The Shining. But like other Kubrick works, it's not true to the book, right?
Yeah, Kubrick was basically rewriting the entire movie as the movie was being shot. And that's something that, as a filmmaker and as a film director, you would never do. That would be a complete and total nightmare for any filmmaker. And he wasn't really impressed with King's novel on the topic. So, what we propose within the documentary is that Kubrick submitted a screenplay for the movie that would be more acceptable by Warner Brothers, because it's kind of said that Warner Brothers kind of pushed him to, kind of gave him the Shining novel, because they had a pre-published copy of Stephen King's novel, The Shining. And Stanley Kubrick is coming off of not a very big successful movie with Barry Lyndon. It was not a critically acclaimed movie. It was not a audience, did not score well with audiences, and it lost a lot of money. And Warner Brothers had already had a really huge success with a horror novel and a big time film director with The Exorcist, and that being William Friedkin. So it stands to reason that Warner Brothers was kind of like, here, this is kind of what we want you to do for your next movie. Since Barry Lyndon did not go over well, here's The Shining. You make a film adaptation of this movie. And he was rewriting the entire thing as he was shooting the movie. And it was getting to the point where Jack Nicholson wouldn't even read the script because it was changing every day. He would just, study the ones that they gave to him every day for the shoot. And that's a really interesting aspect of this, because if Kubrick was trying to hide and code something within The Shining, then that would be the time that he would do it as he was rewriting the movie.
Right. So he just got new drafts every day. Nicholson did. It's really incredible. It's such a great movie. I mean, just watching it purely without looking for things within it or anything, it's really a trip. But there are implications of mind control in the little boy Danny, right? And just this kind of shining, this broken personality and elements of pedophilia, right? Or implications. It's not overtly stated. So you see that theme that is a part of Kubrick's work, going back to Lolita. So it's very dark stuff, right?
It is really dark, and there's this common thread between Kubrick and his films, to where it's like the film like then mimics like reality, or reality mimics the film. You have that with the Clockwork Orange. During in the UK during that time, after Clockwork Orange came out, there was like a lot of murders and crime was heavily on the rise. There was even murders called the Clockwork Murderers, and then the movie got banned, which the entire movie is about mind control. Drugging Alex, the main character, and
Ludovic method, right, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, and so it stands to reason that he would definitely know about some of these programs, just based off of the sheer fact that he made A Clockwork Orange. And there's another one that of like reality manipulating art that you just brought up, which is Lolita as well, with Sue Lyon. The entire movie is essentially about pedophilia, and what's happening to Sue Lyon during the making of the movie is the exact same thing that the movie's about. James B. Harris is having sexual relations with the star of Lolita in real life, as she's making a movie about having sexual relations with an older man when she's 14 years old. And then there's also with The Shining, there's, all the things that happened with Shelley Duvall, which in Lolita, that also ruined Sue Lyon's career. Sue Lyon didn't act after Lolita. Neither did Shelley Duvall. Neither did anybody that was in the Shining movie besides Jack Nicholson. And his last movie was in like 2010 or whatever. No one has heard from him since. Danny, the guy that plays Danny, didn't act in a movie after that. The two people that played the twins in the movie didn't act in a movie after that. So it's like Kubrick has like
a mess, right? Like she's a psych, almost like she's not well, right?
She was not well, and she sadly passed away this year. But yeah, we could have put a lot of things in there about Shelley Duvall, but we wanted to treat her nice since it was really fresh that she had just passed away. But yeah, she basically went out of her mind. I don't know if you've seen that Dr. Phil interview with her, but she is just
not well. The last parts of her life, she just wasn't well. So they gave her the treatment. And Lion Harris, for people who don't know, Harris was the early kind of production partner with Kubrick. They had a company together, if I remember correctly. And then, I mean, there's pictures of those two together, which, So he knew about these things from the earlier movies. So you see those themes go through his work all the way to the end, right? Eyes Wide Shut. Even the last scene of his last movies, like pedophilia, right? In the toy store, all that stuff. But also the mind control's there. So he seems to know this whole thing about mind control. Maybe we can watch the trailer. Maybe it's a good time to play the trailer. So I'm going to play
hallucinogenic drugs, hypnosis, electric shock. Hallucinogenic drugs, hypnosis, electric shocks to the brain.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
Some of the methods used in secret CIA mind control experiments.
There are many theories as to what The Shining is really about, from the faking of the moon landing to Native American genocide and the Holocaust.
Now, if he did fake the Apollo moon landing, then he probably has really deep connections into the intelligence world. Why are there these gigantic continuity errors in this movie?
The occulted meaning has to be comprehensible. It's just hidden, usually in a very systematic way, so that it could be understood by someone coming along later on who knows what the real meaning is supposed to be.
We believe that there's something even more sinister lurking beneath the surface of this masterful film.
So Lookout Mountain Hotel looked a lot like the Overlook Hotel.
You realise that there's no such thing as coincidences like that.
As Lookout Mountain Studios, ran by the Air Force.
That told the story of nuclear weapons testing by the United States.
Of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, the Air Force was known to be the most excited, the most turned on by MKUltra and its prospects.
Reportedly, there were more films made at Lookout Mountain than at all the other film studios in Hollywood.
We really don't know what these famous film directors were being recruited for, what project or whatever. Was it the moon landing?
The CIA's MKUltra programs were admitted to the public in 1975, 5 years before the release of The Shining.
These experiments were done without the informed consent of the patients.
Look at some UFO cases, and the things that are reported tells me that MKUltra is likely being applied.
In my MKUltra mind control experience, I was taken to various military, NASA, and DARPA installations for sophisticated mind control programming.
Walt Disney, Marilyn Monroe, James Stewart, Cary Grant, Ronald Reagan. Nobody really knows what they were doing up there.
As well as high-ranking military and Department of Defense personnel.
What people don't realize is that many of the people that worked with Kubrick also worked with Kennedy. This is actually the smoking gun proving that Kubrick was working with the government.
These were all CIA-sponsored experiments.
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
And putting little symbolic, cryptic clues and Easter eggs pertaining to the fact that they're still doing it.
These clues include a hidden swastika in the background of the gold room.
What was the setup, what it was being told, and realize that it was a lie all along.
But right there in the narrative, in the dialogue, they're telling you that this was a very real program coming out of those nice folks at the CIA.
A hidden swastika.
How brilliant and how a masterful Kubrick was at this introductory scene. He fits what's his name, Jack Torrance, with this green tie. So he's symbolizing he's already in the labyrinth.
Yeah, he's
So,
already in the maze. There's
yeah,
several
he's
of
already-
those throughout the movie that is foreshadowing for events that come later. There's
It's
actually a
brilliant
part
stuff.
where that a lot of people don't even realize is that how many times the baseball bat actually shows up within the movie before Wendy picks up the baseball bat on in the back of the couch from the shot of her and Danny sitting at the table eating. There's a man with a baseball bat on the curtain in the very first scene when the doctor comes to visit with Danny. And then whenever Jack is going to look at the model of the maze, which is one of the more interesting shots of the entire film, when Jack's looking at the model of the maze and then it zooms in on the maze and all of a sudden you're outside, you got that above shot of them outside where Danny and Wendy's outside in the actual maze. Well, right before he turns that corner, the baseball bat can be seen on the couch. And he looks directly at the baseball bat before he goes and looks at the model of the maze. And then also there's the whole teddy bear scene within the movie as well, where in the very beginning of the movie, when in that exact same shot where you see the guy with the baseball bat on the curtain of Danny's room, Danny's laying on a teddy bear. And the teddy bear almost looks identical to the teddy bear that Wendy sees whenever she goes upstairs, and the guy that's dressed up like a teddy bear is performing the sexual act on the man.
Right, that's the tie to pedophilia. That the teddy bear is a known pedo symbol, so that's why it's there at the end of Eyes Wide Shut, and that's why it's in this movie. There's no question about it. So he's putting that symbol in for people in the know back then, in my opinion. But
absolutely, for sure is, and one that I was the one that's seen it. No one else had ever seen it before me. Was in the gold room when Jack stands up the second time and the party is going on and he takes the alcohol from Lloyd the bartender and he stands up. There's a lady that walks right in behind him that looks like she has a handprint on her ass, and she's actually the one that bumps into Grady to make Grady spill the alcohol on Jack before they go into the bathroom to try and wipe it off of Jack. Now, people have argued with me and said that it's not an actual bloody handprint or whatever, but they say that it's just a part of the dress. Well, regardless if it's a part of the dress or not a part of the dress, it still looks like a bloody handprint, and it almost looks identical to the exact same type of bloody handprint that is on Wilson, the volleyball from the Tom Hanks movie in 2000, Castaway. Almost the identical thing.
Wild. And this is like the whole thing, like the black and white pictures here are like, referencing the black and white picture at the end. There's all kinds of fascinating and you notice, you point out in the thing that there's continuity problems that have to be intentional, right?
Absolutely. This movie has some of the most continuity errors out of any other movie. I think it just undershadows Apocalypse Now. I think Apocalypse Now has the most known continuity errors, but Shining is up there. It's definitely in the top 3. There's just so many of them. There's light switches that will be there and then not there in the next scene. There will be light switches that appear that wasn't previously there. The pin on Ullman's desk is jumping around the desk. There's an ashtray with a cigarette butt in it that's jumping around the desk and moving. There's chairs disappearing and reappearing all in the exact same shot. The carpet is changing when Danny stands up in the hallway. It goes from a open facing hexagonal pattern to a closed hexagonal pattern. There's a sticker that disappears on Danny's door. There's so many of them that there's no way that all of these were mistakes. And when you tie it together that this is an experiment. This is not only an experiment happening up at the Overlook with Bill Watson's character in this exact scene where we're seeing on the screen right there with Jack talking to Ullman. Bill Watson is right beside of him on the right, which Bill Watson doesn't even really do anything in the entire movie. He has like 1 or 2 lines. That's him right there, Bill Watson. He doesn't really do anything. Yep, that's him. And he really looks like Sidney Gottlieb in a lot of different ways, but it's very difficult to find pictures of Sidney Gottlieb because a lot of them have been scrubbed. There's only like 1 or 2 pictures of him out there on the internet that you can even find. But he's just an observer. He's there to observe them, and it's an operation that's being run up there. And just between the dialogue between Stuart Ullman and Jack Ullman basically explains everything that's going to happen to Jack in that first 10 minutes of the movie. He says, this isn't a physically demanding job. This is more of a mental job. This is more of a psychological job up here because of the isolation and the things that you're going to go through while you're up here.
These are all like mind control themes too, isolation and all that stuff. Like
exactly. You got the
terminology, right?
Yeah, you got the Kubrick counterintelligence isolation manual. That's the way that they would do to torture people to get information out of them. Which one of them is sensory deprivation? They put them in a sensory
Kubrick,
deprivation.
by the way, for people who don't know, Kubrick is just a coded term for the CIA.
Yep, that's right. And it seems like that Ullman, Bill Watson here, that's on the screen, he seems like he's the one that's really in charge of this. And the guy that looks like JFK, which is Stuart Ullman, he's kind of like the front person for this operation. But Bill Watson here is really running the entire show. And we really get into that toward the end of the film, Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime, is Kubrick had an entire ending to The Shining that was cut out. He had an original ending that really explains the entire movie, and he cut that out, and his excuse is that he had audience test screenings. He had a bunch of test screenings for the movie, and he was like, oh, well, people aren't really enjoying this movie. They're immediately getting up and they're leaving the theater, and Kubrick didn't want that. He wanted them to like stick around and talk about the movie as the credits were rolling. But with this original ending that he had in there, which we know that it was 100% in there because there's pictures of it, there's the screenplay of it, we have the lines, we have all that stuff. We just don't have the footage. It's one of the most infamous pieces of lost media probably ever, that probably no one will ever see. But we have our AI recreation, so in our movie, that you can get a better idea and a better understanding of what that scene, that missing scene at the end of the movie would look like. And that missing scene, I don't want to ruin it because it's really important, and then really brings everything together at the end of the movie, where you really understand exactly what was going on up there. But it really explains the entire movie, because essentially Ullman, I don't want to ruin the whole thing, but essentially Ullman comes into the hospital, and Wendy is laying on a bed and Danny is there, and Ullman goes in and explains to Wendy that everything that she said that happened up at the Overlook, they couldn't find any evidence for.
Wow. So it was all in her mind or something like that or whatever. But it's crazy because you're right. He explains what happened. The other guy went insane, and then Jack goes insane, right? So, but there's weird things in this too. Like, they filmed it at the Awania Hotel in part of it, the Awania Hotel in Yosemite, right? So there is this kind
Timberline Lodge in Oregon was where the exterior shots were shot. And that's another thing, another continuity error that is unmistakable, because in the opening shot, whenever the movie first starts and you see the Overlook, there's not a maze in behind the hotel. But later on, we obviously know that there is a maze, and the maze is a very integral part of the entire movie. But yeah, the exterior shots were shot at Timberline Lodge in Oregon, and then some of the other and the rest was filmed on a set in England.
Okay, so they must have used the Awania Hotel as a model for some shots then, because the Awania Hotel looks like the interior of that Overlook or whatever, because it's all full of old kind of Western and Native American regalia, just like that, so.
And that's also talked about within The Shining too, between Ullman and like all the Beatles symbolism throughout the movie, and them walking, like the exact picture of Abbey Road, the exact artwork that has a white beetle in the background, which was John Lennon's beetle that he had just purchased. And then within The Shining, Kubrick changed the color of Stephen King's beetle in the book. It was red in the book, but then Kubrick changed it to yellow. Then you also have the yellow submarine with the Beatles. And later on in the movie, Halloran, whenever he's driving back up to the hotel, he sees a red crushed beetle on the side of the road, which is definitely a jab at Kubrick. And then you also have the more Beatles stuff going on there, because Kubrick was supposed to have directed and made J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings movies, and it was supposed to star the Beatles as the Hobbits.
Get out of town. I've never heard that. Where's that? Where did you find that reference?
Just type it into Google. Stanley Kubrick directing Lord of the Rings, and it'll pop up.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
But Stanley Kubrick turned it down because he said that at that time that it was unfilmable at that time because special effects hadn't got to that point, and it ultimately landed in Peter Jackson's lap, and then he made the trilogy. So, but that's another Easter egg between the Beatles and Stanley Kubrick, and we can wonder what kind of movie, what kind of trilogy that would have been with Stanley Kubrick directing The Lord of the Rings.
It's incredible. The Shining came out was in 79, is that right?
1980.
80. So it came out at the same time Lennon was shot. So it's like incredible that there's that scene with them having the Catcher in the Rye novel, right? And Atwell talks about that in detail. And I've done a full show on the Catcher in the Rye, so people can check that out. But
yeah, and not only that, too, another thing with the Beatles is that Stephen King got the title The Shining from a John Lennon song called Instant Karma, where it talks about we all shine on. And that's where Kubrick got the inspiration to name the book The Shining. So there's so much Beatles stuff going on within there. And just like what you said with Wendy reading Catcher in the Rye, and then John Lennon being assassinated by Mark David Chapman less than a year after the release of the movie. And it just happens to be the book that Wendy's reading.
It's astonishing. It's incredible. And they found a Catcher in the Rye on the guy who shot Reagan. And it's weird too that they made high school kids all around the country back in the day before this kind of new thought has come in. But that was a commonly, requested book to read, right? About, what was the main character's name? I forgot. Holden Caulfield or whatever. Yes. So, and then a lot of these guys identify with Holden Caulfield, like this disaffected guy in New York City. The weird thing about Chapman is just off the charts. But the fact that they had this Catcher in the Rye, we talked about the pre-show too. It was in Conspiracy Theory, and you have a clip of the Will Smith talking about it too, right?
Yeah, in our movie, we have the clip of The Sixth Sense, which I believe came out in 2003 or somewhere in the early 2000s. We have the title of it in our movie. But yeah, Will Smith is going on about it, and John Hinckley Jr., that you just mentioned, was attempted assassination on Ronald Reagan, which Ronald Reagan also had top secret security clearance for this top secret movie studio Air Force base on top of Laurel Canyon called Lookout Mountain Air Force Base, where many films a lot of them are still classified to this very day. We don't even know exactly what was being filmed up there. And but John Hinckley Jr., the gentleman that was the attempted assassin on Ronald Reagan, was let out of prison in 2022, and now has a YouTube channel where he talks about folk music. Like, man, we got to interview this guy. I got to get him on my show, bro.
Yeah, it would have changed history too if Reagan died. Like that would have been it. It would have been Bush Senior for 8 years, which it kind of really was. People say that he was kind of running the show anyway. But and there's ties between Hinckley and the Bush family as well, oil ties and things like that, which makes it even stranger.
Yeah, the amount of stuff that is in this movie, not only within The Shining, but within our movie as well. There's so much information in there to the point that even if you don't like The Shining, even if you don't like Stanley Kubrick, or maybe even not even watch The Shining, it's not really going to make a difference because there's so many, we take it in so many different directions that there's going to be something in there that you like or that you find interest in. With the cast that we have, it's a very diverse cast, and everyone has their own specialty on the things that they know.
Right, Devlin. It's weird because I talked to Devlin this year. I've talked to actually all those guys at Will, Bosley and Devlin, except for O'Brien, which her interview with Ed Opperman on the Opera Report is worth for people out there worth listening to, I would say. But she's an interesting character. Yeah. So what else is in there? I mean, so you've got the Indian theme, you've got the kind of soul cracking theme with Danny literally has two personalities. Somebody's talking to him, so it's almost like he's gone through traumatic mind control trauma, right? Trauma-based mind control.
Well, it's explained in the beginning of the movie when the doctor comes to visit Wendy at their apartment in Boulder, Colorado, that Wendy says that Jack, abused Danny, and right around that time is whenever he started, imagining Tony, which Tony is the entity that Danny says that's in his throat, but he talks to him with his finger, which is another really interesting aspect of this. But there's not only continuity errors with things disappearing and reappearing and stuff, but there's also continuity errors between the dialogue of the characters as well, which is really interesting when it kind of passes you by on your first couple of watches through, but when you've watched it a bunch of times, you start to pick up on the continuity errors between the dialogue of the characters, because Wendy says that the incident happened 5 months ago, that this incident where Jack injured Danny. Danny had Jack's papers spread out all across their apartment, and then Jack comes in and picks him up really quickly by the arm and injures his arm. And Wendy says that from that point forward, he hasn't touched a drop of alcohol, and he's been sober for 5 months. Okay. Now, when he's talking to Lloyd, the bartender, and he's basically confessing to Lloyd that he did, in fact, hurt Danny, Jack says that it was 3 years ago that it happened. Then there's other dialogue errors as well with Ullman calling the former caretaker Charles Grady, but then whenever Jack is talking to Grady in the bathroom, he refers to himself as Delbert Grady. So there's so many different dialogue continuity errors as well that is very difficult to pick up on if you haven't heard it. But what we propose within the movie is that Danny is basically traumatized by Jack, and that's how he essentially opens up his mind through this because we know with MK Ultra it all revolves around trauma. You have to be traumatized so that your psyche can be split. And then there were several MK Ultra sub projects of the 149 that we know about, which we know that there were several more that actually got destroyed. But out of the
supposedly they said they destroyed it, right?
Right. But the 149 that we do have access to,
the CIA is just so honest about everything.
Oh,
the only reason that there's a picture of Gottlieb is because he had to go in front of the Congress or whatever. That's like one of the known pictures of Gottlieb.
And there's only a couple. There's only a few of them. But we know that there are several sub-projects that were basically focused on, and I'm pretty sure I talked about this on our show before, but there were at least a handful of sub-projects, MK Ultra sub-projects, that were focused on unlocking psychic abilities within the patients. There were studies on telekinesis, remote viewing to a certain degree, and using these drugs to bring about some sort of psychic ability within the patient. So it stands to reason that this was what was going on with Danny, and Danny had unlocked these types of psychic abilities within his mind through the abuse that he suffered through Jack. And then throughout the movie, Jack is becoming susceptible to these MK Ultra techniques by the psychic driving that's going on toward Jack. And we know the psychic driving was basically coined by Ewan Cameron in Canada, where he would essentially take in a recorded tape message and play it over and over and over again. I don't think that he was the first person to originally do it, but he was the one that kind of, this is the one that we all know about, Ewan Cameron. I think they were already doing that in Nazi Germany at that time. But because that's where Ewan Cameron got a lot of his techniques and his ideas to do was from Nazi Germany. But essentially, what Jack is going through at the Overlook Hotel is a form of psychic driving. He's being forced to, essentially write out the same phrase over and over and over again. And he's got, Wendy fooled that he's actually writing a novel, but he's not really writing a novel. He's just, it's that famous scene when Wendy walks in and sees all the papers on the desk, and she keeps flipping through the papers and seeing that it's all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And that is essentially the exact same thing that was happening to Sirhan, which supposedly, because there's evidence to point to the fact that Sirhan really didn't have anything, that he was basically put up for assassinating RFK. But that was the same type of thing that Sirhan was going through as well, with the notebook saying RFK must die, over and over and over again. So Jack is doing his own version of psychic driving within The Shining. And then when Wendy walks in on him and finds that he's just writing the same sentence over and over again, he becomes triggered. And then that's when he starts to, essentially do violence against Wendy and Danny.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. There's so many subtleties there too. Like Kubrick did it. Like at certain points, Jack's looking at right at the camera, like weird things, like he's engaging the audience through looking directly at the lens, and just like it's just something else. There's so much in there, really, that you see how much Kubrick knew, like, and put it into his films, like really astonishing.
Well, not only that, you got the Lookout Mountain studio on top of Laurel Canyon that we mentioned before, but there used to be a hotel that sat at the exact same spot where the Lookout Mountain Air Force Base later became, which Lookout Mountain Air Force Base is now owned by Jared Leto. I'm sure people already are familiar with that if they're not, but if they did, then it's a kind of a surprise. Jared Leto being, the Oscar nominee. Well, I think he won an Oscar for that Dallas Buyers Club with Matthew McConaughey. Yeah. And he's also in the band 30 Seconds to Mars. But there used to be a hotel that sat there before the Air Force put their military base there. And the hotel ended up burning to the ground. And in the sequel to The Shining, the movie, Dr. Sleep, the Overlook Hotel burns to the ground. And the Lookout Mountain Hotel, we show it in our movie, which there's very few pictures of that as well because it burnt down in the early 1900s. But it looks similar to Stanley Kubrick's Overlook Hotel within The Shining. And they both, and at the end of the sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep, it also burns to the ground. So it's this constant thing with Kubrick. It's like it's either art imitating reality or reality imitating art. It's just all over the place with all of his movies.
Right. He was around LA, so he might have known a lot about the Lookout Mountain and stuff like that. I think he was around I think he worked for Look, and then his first films were in Burbank, around that area, So he might.
Yeah, he went to school there, I believe, too, and he lived with his uncle Martin Prevost there for a couple of years.
Yeah, so we know that he had and got out like strange. Ends up after 2001: A Space Odyssey going to England for the rest of his life. Yeah, there's a lot of information there, and it is interesting how much you see like other influences from his past go into his movies that were current when he was making them. It is really something else, but he must have had brilliant people around him too. Like I've read stuff about the making of 2001 and just the group that he had, the research group. So it wasn't just him researching, but other things people would help him research, who may know a lot about this stuff that he's like, oh yeah, let's put that in. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. 2001 was and the strange thing about it is like 2001 was, really being, it's possible. I'm not saying that it's factual, but it's possible that during the making and the filming of 2001 could have been when he shot the footage for the moon landing.
Right. Or influenced it or whatever. There's pictures of him with that guy Mueller in London, and Mueller is NASA. Like this is the head of NASA, like a huge bureaucrat or huge kind of NASA bureaucrat hanging out with Clark and Kubrick. Like, what are the odds? And we know that he got special film cameras and stuff like that. So what else did he get? Who else paid stuff? I think you wrote in one of your things, right? Like the credits, like listed the first credits. That was an interesting fact. The first credits showed like, thanks to all these like deep state people, right?
Yeah, all the intelligence community, Boeing, friggin' Air Force intelligence, the CIA. It's just insane. DARPA, like all these military contractors and the government themselves, and those were the credits. Those were the people that he thanked at the ending credits of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then later on those were removed. And I'm going out on a limb and saying that probably they didn't know that he was going to put that in the credits of the movie, and then someone seen it and was like, no, you can't be thanking us for at the end of your movie, you got to take that out. But we also show documents within the movie with the the military and these intelligence communities being part of the production on several movies. Transformers movies they were a part of. Die Another Day they were a part of. So their influence has been there for a really long time, but it probably started around the time of Dr. Strangelove really heavily, because Kubrick had reached out to the Air Force to, if he can, get the inside of the B-2 stealth bomber. He wanted to make sure that he got the inside of it accurately. But of course, that's at that time that was top secret information that no one could know about, because if our enemy got that information, then they could try and duplicate it or replicate it or whatever. And they denied Kubrick to see what the inside of the B-2 bomber looked like. So then he contacted his production designer, and we have the interview with his production designer in there. And he ended up cutting out a bunch of these articles and these magazines and everything. And then they put together what they thought that the B-2 stealth bomber, the inside of it, would look like to the best of their knowledge. And a military agent shows up on the set and was shocked by how accurate Kubrick got the inside of the B-52 to the actual real B-52. And they thought that they maybe some insider to the military leaked this information to Kubrick. And we have the production designer within the movie in the interview saying that Kubrick contacted him and was like, hey, you better have all your ducks in a row here, exactly how you figured out what the inside of the B-52 looks like, or we're going to be investigated by the FBI.
Crazy. It's amazing. Dr. Strangelove is back in the news. I just saw a clip of Oliver Stone sitting down with Vladimir Putin watching Dr. Strangelove in the end, which is bombing Russia. And they're like discussing, this is how it could end. We have to do fail-safe methods, and Vladimir Putin's agreeing with them. And here we are literally at the brink of nuclear war. So Kubrick strikes again with the kind of dark craziness that's going on right now. That's the decision by Biden and those lunatics to shoot missiles inside of Russia. We're at war without a declaration of war. So we're at beyond Strangelove territory. But credit to Kubrick for kind of capturing that kind of insanity that really took place in the 60s too, with the Cuban Missiles Crisis. Anyway, we are at the 40-minute mark. Ryder, anything you'd like to add? Anything I missed? And tell people where they can watch A Clockwork Shining.
Yeah, you can watch A Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime Video, and if you would also, it's on Apple TV Plus as well. So if you're outside of the United States or outside of the UK, you can get it on Apple TV Plus, and we'll be making it available to everybody worldwide here really soon. And I would just encourage people to please watch the movie and support independent filmmakers. We know Hollywood is dead. It's been dead for a really long time. They just keep pushing out nothing but garbage all the time. And it's really our time now as independent filmmakers to really try and make a lasting impact on this, because it's nothing but reboots, sequels, requels, prequels, and recognizable IP that is constantly being pushed out of Hollywood. And they're getting ready to take over the TV industry as well, like with the streaming, because they didn't get on the whole streaming bandwagon fast enough. And they're getting ready to do exactly what they did to the movie industry, to the TV industry as well. So please, with sequels and prequels and recognizable IP, So please go out and support my movie. I put it all together myself. I edited it and I directed it and I filmed it. So please go out and support.
I'll put a link to the movie, the documentary in the show notes so people can watch it. I'll put a link to your other stuff. I mean, you're doing other work and social media too, and as a guest, right?
Yeah, I have a show called Raised by Giants on YouTube and any and all podcast platforms, and on Rockfin and anywhere else. I don't have a Rumble. I've had a Rumble for a really long time, but for some reason there's a typo in the name of my name on Rumble, and it doesn't make it searchable. But I'm working on fixing that. But yeah, YouTube and any and all podcast platforms. I try and at least do a couple of shows a week. So if you guys are interested in want to come over there, very much appreciate it.
And where can people reach out to you if they're interested? Is the best place social media or X or Twitter or what?
Yeah, you can find me on X at Raised by Giants 8 and on Instagram at Raised by Giants Pod.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time and congrats on the documentary. Really a lot to think about there. A lot of interesting stuff and great guests too. So again, the director is Ryder Lee. And the full title of the documentary is A Clockwork Shining, Kubrick's Odyssey 3. So thanks so much for your time.